Am I supposed to whack it again?
Not just yet.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, Tom's still.
All right. Two more back there coming up. Tom and then Paul walked in as well.
All right.
Are you guys ready to start? Do you want me to go tell them?
Well, if they need a couple minutes, then
I can get out here.
Hello.
Hey, Paul.
Hey, Paul.
How are you guys?
Wow. Excited. Can't wait.
Been better,
You work?
but not bad.
I didn't bring that tree with me.
All right, we're live.
You're just taking the rubber band off?
Live?
Or is that just a rubber band?
You're gonna put us on live while we're
What they
eating?
give him. Yeah. Yep. Make sure you smack. Because Melody loves picking up smacking noises.
Oh, I just drove by Denise's house. Could she get any more campaign signs out there?
They're merely signs. You can't judge the content of the sign. They're blank.
All right, are you guys ready for Pete's presentation?
Oh.
Yes.
Okey-dokey.
All right.
Oh, it's not on.
There we go.
How come it's mine? I know why you sit there, because you made
Is
me have
everybody's
this one.
screen working and microphones
I'll fix
working?
yours. Yeah.
There it goes. Vern beats to a used, a one that works.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming to this early work session. Tonight, we have with us Josh Wheeler, who's our projects manager in Public Works. And so the reason Josh is here is if we have any questions about public facilities and the findings that we've made in the staff report regarding that, or any question related to public facilities, Josh is going to try to help us out with that stuff. So thanks for being here, Josh. Appreciate it. So this work session is a follow-on from the 27th of August. And what we're discussing tonight is the few of the, 8 of the items that we discussed at the last hearing. And Elizabeth Decker is going to be here. I assume she's got some traffic issues with the,
Okay, there we go.
with the rush hour, but,
Thank you. I'm trying to get you.
and she was gonna talk to you in more detail about the parking memorandum that is in your packet, and the parking alternatives memorandum. But I'm gonna lead you through that too. So if we wanna circle back when Elizabeth gets here, if we have any outstanding questions about it, we can do that.
Get to that screen.
So, tonight,
Pushing it.
our
wait a
formal
second.
recommendation is to continue this. When we have the public hearing, we'll be asking for a continuance to the next planning commission meeting date. And tonight, I'm just going to go through some of the things that we talked about last week. And I just want to be, I'm going to be asking for a decision on these items. I'd like you to give me either a visual thumbs up or a visual thumbs down, and if you have a
Those are the only two fingers you're talking about.
thumbs, please. And if you have an item before that period, before that decision point, in case you want to, change the direction of the decision, then just, let's talk through it. Raise your hand and do that. So the items that we're talking about, that we're looking for a decision on are owner occupancy on accessory dwelling units and whether to remove those. We're going to be talking about the off-street parking for ADUs and the other housing units, internal conversions, and 3 to 4 plexes. We're going to talk about the lot averaging and the recommendations related to that. And if you have any further ideas on what to include as far as lot averaging, I've got a slide. We're going to talk about the mixed-use downtown height limit and the recommendation to remove the 45-foot height limit in the mixed-use downtown zone, except near the end of the Oregon Trail Center. Talking about conditional use requirements for transitional shelters. The recommendation there is to allow them by right in the mixed-use corridor 1 and 2 and mixed-use downtown zone. Food carts, master plan PUD, some discussion about when to require that and what the thresholds should be. And finally, the natural resource overlay district with respect to exemptions for fences. So accessory dwelling unit owner occupancy, hi Denise. The proposal and recommendation from the PAT is to remove the requirement for owner occupancy of the primary dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit for properties developed with an ADU. And we discussed this last time. Reasons for that are to facilitate more financing options for an owner, provide some flexibility for use of the property, and creating fairness with other housing types that don't have that same requirement, and reducing code enforcement complaints. The concerns are that ADUs could lead to allowing just anybody to use an ADU without being an owner. So ostensibly, you could have a property where both properties were rentals. But if it was anything less than 30 days, that's a conditional use, and it's going to require a conditional use permit in terms of it being a.
Of course, if they come in and do it.
If they do.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do want to tell you that I took an hour getting through Fred Meyer today because 2 people stopped me about that very provision while I was grocery shopping.
What aisle was that on?
What aisle were you in?
No, Fred Meyer, it's always an aisle that somebody stops you in.
Yeah, it was the bed and bath.
Okay.
So,
The other concerns are it could increase the number of renters. There's no limitation on the number of people living in a house currently. That's a fair housing issue, and we do have a robust code enforcement mechanism for property maintenance. So it's something where we rely on the neighborhood to keep their neighbors in check. And if a property is starting to look like it's visually not compatible with the rest of the neighborhood, then that's a nuisance issue, and can be dealt with that way. The other concern, hi, welcome. The other concern was that it could lead to speculative development. And so, ADUs can discourage demolitions by providing an option to add value to properties. And I've certainly heard that from owners, while increasing the number of housing units as part of the missing middle housing options. So on that issue, we have some data we wanted to share with you from the previous work session. And I'm not sure everybody was at the last work session, so it'd probably be beneficial to go through this again.
no, they were not. And
Yeah.
my big complaint about this is this port limit has no applicability to Oregon City, unfortunately.
Right, but yeah, the reason that we said that last time was, there's a lot of data out there for ADUs from Portland, and so
Is there
It's
ADU
useful.
data from someplace else?
there probably is. Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that? Pete, let's say that we allow this. And, this is an extreme example, I admit it. But in a neighborhood, let's say that, you get 500 homes in a neighborhood. And 500 people take advantage of it. Now, I know that's not gonna happen, but conceivably, if a lot of people did this, it could change the character of a neighborhood. It could increase the density significantly. It could increase the traffic significantly. There's a question as to whether or not they're gonna be off-street or on-street parking. A line of least resistance is what's gonna be, you're gonna park where you're gonna park. Do we really understand what could happen to a neighborhood if that were the case? Are we just going into this blind and just for the sake of making a
Well,
change?
we've made some pretty pretty reasonable assumptions about what the likelihood is of property owners taking advantage of this based on percentages of these units in various municipalities. And that report from John Replinger that you heard about the transportation impact, a lot of the analysis and assumptions that we made for that indicate that, first of all, we don't expect a lot of owners to take advantage of this. And based on past data, that we have. The type of situation I think you're talking about where everybody opts to do an ADU, first, it's going to be dispersed over time. It's probably not going to happen, everywhere in the city. It's probably going to be random areas throughout the city. And if it ever did get to the point where, you had, a subdivision proposal where where the developer was going to build ADUs as part of that proposal, that would require a traffic analysis because that would reach the threshold that you really need to worry about it. We have already made a determination about accessory dwelling units in our code that they are of negligible impact with respect to traffic analysis, with traffic impacts because they're smaller units and household sizes are shrinking and that sort of thing.
What really concerns me is the safe street factor. I'm really up in arms about safe streets. And, people walking in streets and stuff like that, and sight distance clearance and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And, if somebody's got an ADU, they live in the back and they got a car that they can't get to an off-street park, they're gonna park on the streets, they're gonna clutter the streets and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's where we get into the parking issue. I mean, if there's a lot of other street safety factors that go in. If you have a complete street, you've got a sidewalk, you've got full pavement and that sort of thing, pavement on.
Development affects the streets, not just the volume, not just the flow, but everything else that goes along with it.
And I would say the majority of ADUs are going to be built in low-density, single-family residential neighborhoods that already have fairly wide streets and have parking out in front of them. That's where the vast majority, in fact, 99% of our ADUs are being built. They're only going to be allowed in the low-density zones, so R10, R8, and R6.
What concerns me is unintended consequences. That concerns me.
Right. So unintended consequences are hard to predict.
Yeah, that's why we have to be
But,
careful.
but I mean, that's why I think we have to be looking at worst case. In the worst case, is this still a viable situation? And, so, for instance, I had a little brief talk with Laura, so she's probably all ready to lob grenades back at me. But if a developer does, say, an R6 development with minimum block lengths, and he does corner duplexes, we can literally have corner duplexes on a lot, that's doubling the density, and an R6 house with an ADU between them, doubling the density. So you've got R3 living in an R6 zone. And lots of tiny blocks. And, because you put an ADU in and there's no off-street parking requirement for residences, they're all parking on the street. So you've got cars lined up on both sides of the street.
Well, we're going to talk about the parking issue, but.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
He's getting into it now.
And you're doubling the zoning density of the area. And that's entirely doable underneath, what's proposed. So, yeah, they have to do a traffic analysis, but, if it's one subdivision, we've already seen that one subdivision can pack them in and diversify out through enough intersections that you don't see the impact because they didn't check 7th and Washington or 2nd and Tumwater, where all those people are going to end up dumping, or South End and 99. So, I think that's, there's the reality check of the idea that everything, say, in South End is going to develop like that is, the reality check is it won't happen. But we still need to be prepared for, you know, some form of that. And to say, well, you know, ADUs only happen 2% of the time, they're de minimis. Until we change this, until the housing market changes, until prices get so crazy for a single family that they decide it pays to remodel the garage. And then suddenly, plop, 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 plop. Hopefully at the same time, and, you know, for, you know, and the gas goes to $5, $10 a gallon. And then people are like, you know, plop, 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 hey, TriMet, there's enough people, drive a bus down here instead of getting my car, or, you know, build a transit center as part of the development or whatever. But, you know, if that isn't what happens, then, you know, we're looking at, you know, potentially tiny, narrow streets like inner southeast, where people have to park alternatingly in order for the person to drive down the street.
Yeah.
And heaven forbid a fire truck needs to go down it.
I think it's important to make your issues distinct here, because on the one hand, allowing ADUs in single-family residential neighborhoods is already a thing that's required by state law. So then really you're dealing with a parking issue, and the street width and that sort of thing, and whether you're going to allow it to be credited on the street or off the street. So we've got a slide
Much
that
for my
deals with that.
graphics.
So are we doing this to comply with state law?
But we already allow ADUs by state law. There's nothing in the state law that's,
Yeah, we already allow accessory dwelling units. We've allowed accessory dwelling units since 2004.
but you have to live there.
What we're proposing is removing the parking requirement for ADUs
Tom's didn't blink.
and the owner occupancy. Yeah,
So he's on-
and this is a recommendation coming from the project advisory team after several months of discussion.
His own presentation.
Okay.
I'm gonna put his own presentation.
And I don't feel so bad.
Well, you bring up a good point.
Yeah, that's okay. She's referring.
So let's tackle the owner occupancy issue, and then we can talk about parking. Do you want to address this in a little more detail, or this one?
About owner occupancy specifically?
I don't
Get these
know if we really,
Yeah.
we've been there, done that. Yeah.
Okay. So if, I'm gonna ask you for, should properties with ADUs be required to be owner occupied or no? Thumbs up or thumbs down?
So thumbs up is yes owners, thumbs down is no owners, or you want to just ask us two
Thumbs up
questions?
I don't want to do any
should
thumbs.
be owner occupied, thumbs down should not be required to be owner occupied.
I guess,
What just about raise a hand?
yeah, question, not question, but here's the thing. If it becomes a problem in the future, let's change it in the future. Let's just leave it the way it is now and see if it's an issue. Because we don't know if it is or not. And we're proposing to change something that we don't know whether it is or isn't.
But if you use that logic and never give anything a try to see if it will help you with
We are
lower-
giving it a try. We're giving the ADUs a try.
But we already know the answer from the last, when did they start ADUs?
2004.
2004? So we've got 14 years of data, or sort of have data, that tells us it wasn't very popular in the last 14 years. If we stay with that, we can probably predict what we're gonna get for the next future years. But if we tweak something and.
We're trying to fix a problem that ain't broke. That's,
Well,
yeah,
we're not trying to fix the problem then, is what
No.
maybe.
it's not.
How many people even knew? I never even knew that ADUs were approved by the state since 2004. How many people didn't know it, and all of a sudden, when they find out,
Well, I'm not sure state is.
We
but-
have got
but I
quite a
think we
few
need to
questions
give it a
over the
try.
years.
And we can do a mid-course correction in 2025 if we've got ADUs coming out all over the place.
Well,
7 years from now.
Unfortunately,
We can
my
make a change.
experience here has, that's not happened. That has not happened. There's been no mid-course correction.
Yeah, takes.
I think there's
forever to get
also a lot of
coached.
inertia to
So we're
overcome when you
staying
buy
frozen in
a,
the tundra and
sorry?
not moving forward.
when you buy a dwelling with the idea that you're going to have an ADU with it and you don't have to be on the premises, and you've been promised that by the realtor, and then the city suddenly decides that they're gonna change in the middle of the stream, then you're gonna have a bunch of property owners that are gonna be kind of,
I agree.
upset about having an ADU that they all of a sudden have to occupy. They may not be able to do that. And what's to keep somebody from buying, a block of them? And I know this is hypothetical and it's probably fairly far-fetched, but if you buy like 3 of them and you wanna buy 3 of them and you wanna, use that as your income property, and you don't have to live there, and you have tenants in the house and the ADU, I want to know, and I want to see if anybody can look at it straight-faced and say, if that neighborhood is going to be the same as if it would be if the ADUs were actually occupied.
You mean
And I
if your
think-
You mean if the homes were
If the-
occupied?
Well,
by the
homes or
owner?
ADUs.
Right.
I mean, I think you should be able to occupy either one.
Right.
You can either rent out the home and occupy the ADU, or occupy the home, rent out the ADU.
The discussion of
But
the,
I think the homeowner should be there, or the property owner should be there.
But that's not true in any other homes in Oregon City. That you buy a house, and it may be a brand-new house.
Yeah,
You
that's
live in
true.
it for 2 years,
Yeah.
and you say, hey, I gotta move, I like the location. Why don't I move to Frisco and pick up some big bucks for 5 years and rent this house out and plan to come back at a future time and live there, because there's something that attracted
But that's
you there.
not splitting
If
the
you-
house out.
If you don't
I
allow
have to
that,
facetiously correct you.
well,
San Francisco.
What you
well,
said.
nothing to do-
Facetiously correcting you.
I think the issue
let's move to Seattle.
is a
Same-
little bit
same
tied to
situation.
ADUs
I don't
splitting
think
it.
that there's as much of an issue with buying a house and renting it out in a, single-family neighborhood, maybe, as there would be with houses and ADUs. I don't know.
Renters need a place to live also. It's not
Indeed.
just the owners.
I agree.
So and this is what this whole affordability or housing that we're looking at is getting housing that is available to buyers and renters.
We have no
But Vern,
control.
You're not
We have
helping
no
it with-
control
Do you know
over
what
that.
you just said,
We have
Vern?
no control
If
over
somebody
that.
buys a house there and they decide to move to San Francisco for a while, did I say that right? And they leave their house for rental, so that's not gonna make it any cheaper for somebody. But the idea of ADUs, you're gonna have 2 properties now, so if somebody buys this house, splits it, buys this house, splits it,
But-
you've got 6 homes where there used to be 3.
But who's taking the risk on that? It's not the city, it's the owner.
It's the
Who has
owner.
put up the money.
But does the neighborhood
and he
want
will-
that many
He will
people?
rent it as long as he can.
But does the neighborhood want that many people with that many cars?
If the neighborhood finds that they don't want that in 5 years from now, there will be pressure coming back to the city commission, planning department, and saying,
Very
hey,
naive.
this is a
But I-
wildfire getting away from us.
but I agree with Paul,
I don't
too.
think we can assume that that's gonna happen.
But I agree with Paul, that all of a sudden you change the rules after someone's done it, I don't think that's appropriate. I think we should change them now to make sure they're appropriate, because if you wait and do it 5 years from now, then you've got a mix of people, well, you never told me when I did this, and so I'm gonna go forward with it.
But is it
We
fair to
found
have
out
a,
Something in the meantime that says.
But that doesn't
yeah,
resolve the past.
But if you don't want to ever try and take a risk moving forward.
We're
you're gonna
taking a
be
risk
stuck
just by
where we are
adopting this.
today.
No, I agree, but see, you said if they decide after they buy their house and they move to San Francisco, rent out their house, that's not lowering and making them more affordable. He's gonna rent it out at a high dollar mark to be able to pay for his taxes and everything else.
It comes down to supply and demand.
And it's gonna
Will
keep going
determine
up
the
and up.
rental price.
So I don't think we'll ever get to affordable housing because of the fact that everyone's gonna rent their properties, whether ADUs or otherwise, at the highest possible premium they can. All they have to do is go out and chit chat, and look at all the people looking for something even 1,200 or less, and they can't find them.
Well, supply and demand will dictate that rental price when you get a
This
mix.
isn't gonna make
Then
it
we
go
should,
only got-
then we should do a Tom McCall at the border kind of a thing. Come visit, don't stay.
But I think what Commissioner Guile is talking about is about density, and the question is about owner occupancy.
Right, but he's
And
saying,
so that's a different,
I agree.
the question of how many people and how many units is a different question than the question of owner occupancy.
I agree, but what I was saying, because Vernon had said, well, if they buy a house and they move to San Francisco, for example, then they can rent out that house. But that wasn't anything to do with ADUs, it was just the fact.
No,
that
but
we
it
can
points
rent
out the double standard that we have for regular houses versus ADUs. And the double standard, it doesn't make sense to have a higher standard for an ADU, in this case, when the goal is equitable housing.
And anybody can build an apartment house and rent out all the units too, right?
Good
There-
point.
No owner has to live in the apartment building.
But these are existing neighborhoods, is where I was going with the.
But there is usually a manager in the apartment
Boy,
building.
But
the-
this manager doesn't have to live on site in the zoning code. under
True.
the zoning code.
Yeah.
Good point. But these usually are existing neighborhoods that are splitting up and going to ADUs.
Yeah.
Do you guys
Mike?
want to take a
Carrie, Mike's
preliminary
not on.
thumbs up, thumbs down, or do you want to have Pete take a preliminary poll just to see where you're at? I know we have a lot of issues to cover tonight.
Yep, I think,
Yep, let's do
we'll
it. Sure.
vote, I'm sorry, whatever.
So,
I think the question is,
Right there.
If you think the standard that we have currently should be changed so that we no longer have an owner occupancy requirement, thumbs up.
What?
Not doing thumbs up. You can
Why don't
just,
you ask
I
this
can just go
question
down
that's
the
up
line
here?
and just ask
I didn't
this.
even understand
It's
the
just
question.
ridiculous.
Okay,
So Zach is saying yes, it
yes,
should be changed.
I don't think it should be changed.
no.
No,
No.
Yes,
And that's owner occupied. I want to clarify what you asked.
yes, that's what he's saying.
And you all said no?
We all said
And
no.
I said no.
Okay,
that's fine.
so the standard will stay the same, we will still
So here's my
require.
concern.
I understand your concern.
No, this is a separate one.
Okay,
However we decide on this, I want to be certain that the presentation that is going to happen by staff is going to represent the planning commission's position. Not some other position that the PAT said, because that's done. If we say that we want it
well,
this
that's why
way.
we're asking.
Right, so I just want to clarify.
Okay.
Because I just want to say politely that in the past, that has not been the case.
if the planning commission feels as though, sorry, if the planning commission feels as though staff hasn't accurately represented them before the city commission, they're more than welcome to attend the city commission hearings or to write a written something to go with the city
I'm
commission.
relying on
I know
you
we have talked about that
To
in.
make our presentation, to say this is what we're recommending to you. The only reason I bring it up is that I attended the lot averaging, and you guys did a really good job of presenting what we said, and then somehow or another, by the time we got back around, it was, well, here was the other options, and it just got totally convoluted while I was sitting there watching the whole
Yeah.
thing like I was, like I was having an out-of-body experience.
And I watched it on TV, I agree.
I did not watch it on TV, I was here in person, because you guys asked me to attend. So I'm confident that you will adequately represent what our recommendation is.
So do you want to summarize that with one sentence that you want us to repeat if the city commission, should they
At
ask?
this point in time, we do not see a need to change the current requirements. Should there be a need in the future, loosening the requirements is easier than tightening the requirements.
Exactly. That's kind of what I agree on. You can keep it the way it is, and then circumstances change, and this just is better than beyond our wildest dreams. I'd be happy to come and testify and saying, yes, I think we should change it.
All right, well, now we have your statement and
Yes.
we will represent it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
because that's where I was with I was on the fence about the whole thing, but, it comes down to if we say no to owner occupancy, it is, the genie's out of the bottle. I mean, putting the owner occupancy requirement back is almost impossible. But if things, if you start getting lots of requests and they're, oh, well, I can't do that or whatever, then, it can be brought back and revisited. We've lost 20 development opportunities and low-income rental opportunities because of this requirement.
Well, we did articulate that, just to
Right,
clarify.
but it wasn't a number and it was a few, and ADUs are already, they've been said several times, are de minimis impact. So having some of the de minimis impact impacted isn't a big deal. Oh, no, 0.1% has been affected. But we should work on, the 7 and 8 and 12% things.
All right, and Pete's gonna move on to the next one, I think. He's going.
So with respect to parking, we're trying to balance concerns about on and off-street parking availability with development feasibility for ADUs, internal conversions, and 3 to 4 plexes to support the goals of this project. The greatest flexibility provides that owners make the decision about whether they're going to provide parking or not. And the staff and the PAT felt that that was a reasonable approach. It was consistent with the existing minimum parking standards for residential development and helps to remove some barriers. So the proposed parking by unit type, the ones that are not changing are single-family detached, single-family attached, and duplex. With our new unit types, corner duplexes, the proposed minimum is 0. Accessory dwelling units, the recommendation is for 0. The existing minimum is 1. Internal conversions, the recommendation is 0 parking. 3 to 4 plexes, which is essentially a single-family attached product, such as you would have now in the code, and doesn't have a standard now, would still be 0. Cluster housing, the current standard is 1.5 spaces per unit, and the proposal is for 1. And multifamily.
1 per unit?
1 per unit. And multifamily is 1 space per unit. So we go through these individually.
Can I go back to, it says up above unit type. So in that cluster, depending on how many homes are in the cluster, it's not 1 per the cluster, it's 1 per each home in the cluster.
1 for each home in the
'Cause
cluster.
it says up here unit type, and I just want to make sure.
That's confusing.
Well, dwelling unit type is, yeah, okay. Well, it means 1 per unit. So for ADUs, we've got 3 options that Elizabeth talked about in her memorandum. And option A is the PAT staff recommendation. And we talked about this being a potential barrier. The idea is that if we remove the parking requirement, somebody can still provide it, and we would expect that they will if they want to. If they have sufficient space on the street, they can use that. The alternative B, or option B, is to go with the current code, which is 1 space, either on-street or off, for an ADU. And option C is to increase the parking so that there's 1 minimum space for the existing house, as well as for the accessory dwelling unit. And so that's essentially 2, if you've got that. And those can be on-street or off-street.
So how do you determine, how is it being determined that sufficient space existing is there?
If it's on-street or
Well, I'm
off-street.
assuming that's what's
Yeah,
meant.
well, our typical garage setback is 20 feet.
Right.
A typical parallel parking space is 22 feet adjacent to the abutting property. So that would be sufficient, considered sufficient space, or we would
How is
also
that-
consider garage
How much,
space.
who makes
Yeah.
that determination that it's sufficient? Because I mean, to me, that's kind of, you know, let me just give a hypothetical. So somebody wants to have whatever type of unit in my neighborhood where there isn't sufficient on-street parking, and they say, well, I'm going to use the one over here on the on-street, and I'm going to use this one in my driveway. And I come in and say, well, that may be fine and dandy, but, you know, that's in front of Joe Schmo's house, and so how would that be sufficient for you to take that spot for that person? So, I mean, it's a little subjective. I mean,
We have dimensional
Sure, yeah.
standards in the zoning designation that give length of curb space and sizes and dimensions. And then also it says it has to be in front of your own property. So there are provisions in this that we utilize now for multifamily or commercial already.
There is a
That have
code that says you have to park
Clear
it
and
in front of
objective
your house.
standards. What's that?
There is a code that says you have to park it directly in front of your house.
No. This is if you're counting for your off-street parking space and you want to count an on-street parking space for that, you can count it if it's directly abutting your property and it meets certain requirements as well as dimensional standards. So it has nothing to do with just a single-family detached residential. There are no parking requirements for that.
That's right.
Yeah, and if I can, the concept of sufficient, it really doesn't get at that broader concept that you're getting at, Chair McGriff, of like, is there enough
Just
parking in the
Denise is
neighborhood?
fine. Thanks, we're in a work session.
Just try for the
I
record.
know, that's okay, that's fine, we're informal here.
Great. Yeah, and we, looked at some ideas around that sufficiency, but really because it's a housing standard, the state requirements require that it's clear and objective. And so capturing that like sufficiency concept is something, we could all kind of look down the street and get a gauge of it, but it's not something that we can codify as well because, as you said, it can be a little subjective. So we stuck with the dimensional standards of, is it physically available and does it meet these dimensions? Something that applicants can demonstrate at the time they come in for their ADU permits.
Well, I'm just gonna say something as a global statement about all the parking. And I think I've been fairly clear that I think off-street parking is off-street parking. It's not off-street parking and something else. I mean, a single-family house with no off-street parking is one car. Probably two, but we'll go with one car. One family, one car. Then they do a 4-way internal conversion, and it's 4 families with a 50-foot frontage. How do you put 4 cars in 50 feet?
The lawn.
On the lawn,
Except, you don't have enough greenway.
we're ready for dog patch,
So-
yeah.
Well, so
Kegerator.
I think, just as a kind of a general thing, if you want to go back, Pete, to the other slide, I just think it needs to be something along the lines of like a 1 for 2 off-street. That if you've got, and round it up, so you don't have a half a spot. So if it's a single-family dwelling, it gets 1 spot. If it's a duplex, it can get 1 spot, but maybe 2, because that's the way the person wants to sell it. An ADU and a regular house, that's 1 spot. A 3 conversion is 2 spots. And it's easy to decide who gets to park, in those spots because you just rent accordingly, and, that at least pulls some of those ensures that some of those cars don't become, on-street parking. Because conceivably, somebody under these current proposals could build an ADU in front of their garage. And, just convert that garage and add 800 square feet because, that's allowed under internal conversions, and their driveway and their garage go away. So it's just a concern that and there are some houses currently that have no off-street parking. And I'm thinking of some of the older areas where it's like, they have a garage, but it's only 6 feet wide because you were supposed to get off your horse and back your buggy into it, so
Wait, just teasing that out.
Yeah.
So where do those people park?
they park in front of their house.
But yet, we don't have a proposed minimum that they would have needed that parking. So yet, they're still able to park because that's what the market demanded when they built the house.
But they can't always park in front of their house.
Right, but yet they're parking there. And really, I'm just trying to establish that despite us not having a minimum for a single family house, people are still getting by and parking, even in situations where there's no street parking. And so I don't know if it makes really good logical sense that we, again, have this higher requirement for an ADU when we're trying to situate this through the lens of equitable housing. Because if we look for a case point, we have all of these single-family houses that are out there without a requirement for parking, with lots of driveways and lots of garages.
There used to be a requirement for parking. It was 2 off-street parking spaces per. So there's a lot of pre-existing development that have off-street parking requirements.
Well, then maybe it's a question to staff of how much single-family housing they think is in the city that is existing with only street parking.
Have any of you ever tried to park in southeast Portland, Hawthorne, in that area? Realizing that you have to drive around and around and around trying to find a spot to park there, or
Yeah,
northeast
usually park
Alameda
3
District,
blocks off and
or
walk.
Seattle, even worse, when I've gone up there to visit, and you cannot find a parking spot in residential. And I look at this and I go, no, it just can't be that Oregon City would do this.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my problem is that the existing minimum is 0 in that top column. You know, that you can build a duplex with no off-street parking.
Yeah.
You know, so,
Doesn't it become a combination of off-street parking and on-street parking? And do we have a definition of how far should you have to circle the block or walk to find a spot on-street?
Well, yeah,
You're not
you're
gonna
talking
always
about
find
a
one in front of your
commercial
own house.
district, we're talking about residential.
yeah.
So that's different.
Well,
Hawthorne is different. It has
But
mixed
we're gonna
use, it
become
has
Hawthorne.
residential, but.
Will become Hawthorne if we let this go. I was even shocked to see 0 for proposed for a 3 to 4 plex. Where are all those people gonna park? And I just keep thinking of, as I've said before, I've seen fire trucks twice try to get through our neighborhood, and we have wide streets, but when people park on the streets, boy, good luck getting ambulances and fire trucks and police cars through.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it needs to be 1 for 1. I mean, it kind of would be if, you know, in a single family, but, it just, every place I've been where there isn't the ability to get off the street, short of driving onto the parking strip and or your front yard, it's, you know, it becomes a problem, not necessarily today, not necessarily tomorrow, but in 15 years, in 20 years, when, you know, potentially we've got jetpacks and we're teleporting from point A to point B, and, you know, but, or gas is so expensive, it's, you know, nobody's driving anywhere, and they're all just, as my dad used to say, yard art as they're rusting in front of the house.
Yes, you're right.
But it's, you know, I just, you know, corner duplexes, ADUs, internal conversions, I mean, these are all things that we're trying to, you know, they're in the code, we're trying to change. And this is an opportunity, again, to set a standard that can be loosened, but after, you know, a few developments happen, you know, it's hard to tighten them back up. You know, if a place turns into a 3-unit internal conversion, and then we say, the rules have changed, you need to put you know, 2 parking spots, they'll be like, but not us, because we don't have to, and
We're grandfathered in.
yeah, so, I don't know, it's just been my concern in all my travels that, you know, if we don't have a refuge for their cars, then, you know, and,
Well, even if we could just pause there.
yeah,
Because when I think about our housing and the crisis and this need to have equitable housing, it's about people.
not their possessions.
The car be damned. I mean, this is about homes for people. And we're trying to get solutions for the people. And I disagree that in 5 or 10 years it will be a problem. It may be an inconvenience, but a problem is something that is, you know, a challenge to you. I think is a little in more harsher terms. I don't disagree that this could be an inconvenience, and if I want to have a house party with my friends or whatsoever, but I think we can get around that. And there's solutions for it, but I don't think it's insurmountable.
I agree, and that's why I'm not proposing a 1 for 1, but I would say it could be a problem because, just like Tom said, you can't get a fire truck in to put your house out. That's a problem. That's not it. You know, taking
That's
an
street
extra
design.
20 minutes to get to work because you got to take different set of streets, that's an inconvenience, and I agree with that. But, you know, so I just, you know, I think the less, you know, and some of these homeless people are living in their cars, and they want someplace other than a curb to park them. So when they finally can step up, so I agree. You know, like I said, that's why I'm not saying one for one, or duplex, two places, and, you know, all that. I think there's a balance in there, and what that is, I don't know. But
And it may be hard to find that balance immediately, but, you know, if we're trying to get more bicycles or buses or cheap taxi cabs to travel around, you get invited to a birthday party in a complex and there's never enough spots for 10 people to come for whatever. And if you, $2 to get a cab ride or a Lyft or whatever, or bus or bicycle, you just don't know what's gonna be the possibility when you give it a try.
There we go with the buses, but how many buses serve anything? No bus comes up to
I'm
Holcomb
not
Boulevard.
guaranteeing there's any buses
And no
gonna
bus,
ever be there.
and no car's gonna, or no bike ever is gonna go up all the way up Holcomb
Or
and
you
down.
can walk, you know, it's,
I'm not at the age to
So
walk.
can we take these in
If we
groups?
change our topography, we can,
Yes.
you know, the big one.
Just real quick, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but just for one sentence maybe, because we have the pleasure of having Josh Wheeler here, and he is our Development Services Manager that looks at street segments. The concerning thing that keeps coming up is fire trucks not being able to fit when there's cars parked on the side. And so if you could just say one sentence about the dimensional standards of the street and if a fire truck will fit.
Well, I can add this in there, you can put it any way you want. I'm a new development since 2003, extra wide streets. Yet the fire trucks, we've had 2 fires on
What
our
do you
block.
mean extra wide?
Well, there's cars on both sides and you can
That's the
still fit through.
Yeah.
But the fire trucks came through, the fire trucks, the ambulances and police, and there was no way. They had to park at angles coming down the street like this, just to get
Well, you have
close
a
to the home.
60-foot right-of-way in Trailsview, right?
Probably. It's wide, but still,
Not that
they were
wide.
out there. So word it any way you want, but I know what I've seen twice now.
The reality with our roadway standards are set for a fire truck to be able to come down the road. However, you are correct that some roads do not meet our current standards and therefore may be substandard for fire trucks. So proposed in the future, we should be okay. Existing, that's where the challenge lies.
Well, they were acceptable at the time those developments were built. So,
But mine was as late as 2003, which is
well, I know,
pretty
but
late.
there was a standard in place in 2003 that said that it was adequate. So it's not like the city didn't make standards that were adequate. It's just,
What's the standard now for a street, the width?
It varies on the,
How many homes they want to squeeze in?
no, it matters on the amount of traffic that we expect to have. So whether it's an arterial or collector or a local street.
what's
Depends
local
on how
street?
big.
Yeah, because ours is
Local street is the smallest stylus street, and I don't know it off the top of my head.
It's
residential.
54 feet. And I didn't want to go down
yeah,
this
see,
rabbit hole.
it has been 6, curb, you know, curb to curb.
I know not since 2004, I don't know.
No, I'm just
about
telling you
before
what
that.
it was before.
So when we're looking at the tighter grid neighborhoods like McLaughlin, Kenema,
Yep.
and up by the hospital,
Yeah, park.
I hate to propose different code requirements for different areas, but I don't know. I mean, it might be okay, what might be okay for the Hilltop might not be okay for McLaughlin in terms of, allowing or requiring or eliminating parking requirements and creating an issue where you have a lot of cars parking on the streets in the narrow ones. Because I know the ones down on the gridded ones are 40 feet, so 40-foot right-of-way and a 20-foot paved width, 2 10-foot travel lanes roughly.
I think you're getting at I'm not saying that I'm totally copacetic with it, but what you're getting at, again, is trying to make this fit the community that we're in as opposed to making it one size fits all. And unfortunately, Oregon City is not a one size fits all because every area is completely different.
A lot of different.
You know, where we're building out where Vern lives, well, you've got a whole different situation where it's fairly flat. Where I live, no, it's not. And not all the streets have, curbs and sidewalks. A lot of them do, but there's still places in your neighborhood, there's, streets, there's no curb, there's no sidewalk. And, sure, it looks wide, but maybe we need to take an approach of trying to make things work by how they work in a particular area as opposed to the one size fits all, which is what I've been complaining about since day one, that this is a one size fits all. What works for Portland is gonna work for Oregon City, and what works for Westland is gonna work for Oregon City, and it doesn't.
What works for Hilltop doesn't work for Kenema.
No, and Kenema is a completely different ball of wax.
Pete, do you want to go through these one by one and then we'll sort of get down
Are
to
you gonna
them?
take a vote on A, B, or C for right now, just to see where we stand?
Well, I'm thinking, and I'd like to get your feedback on the top three categories. I don't think that we should revisit the existing minimums that have been in place for as long as I can remember. I would like to talk about the second, the ADUs. So let's talk about that. And what do you guys think?
I'm a C, and that's it, but I'll settle for a B.
I'm an A.
I'm at B.
Well, there's so many complexities here, it's hard to justify them all, and you either have to say yes or no. I'd go with yes on an A.
B.
Okay.
B.
Okay, so B is maintaining the existing requirement.
By how many people said B?
Four.
And one, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Great.
5. No, somebody didn't vote, 4 and 1 is 5.
It was 4-3.
Okay.
4-2. Oh,
Or 2.
We
Yeah,
got,
because Bob had to go to.
Yeah.
we got 6.
Yeah, I changed it to 4 to 2.
Okay, second one is essentially the same standard as an ADU. We haven't had a standard for an internal conversion before because an internal conversion would be an accessory dwelling unit inside a house. So,
Like a basement or something,
pardon?
like a basement apartment.
Basement or garage conversion or something like that, yeah. Or even an addition.
So they'll C1 is 1 per unit, the main unit as well as the ADU?
Well, the conversion.
This is for an internal conversion, so it would be one space for the unit, not for the existing house, just for the new unit.
Kim?
Go ahead.
So one thing to understand about internal conversions is they could be anywhere from a total of 2 to 4 total units. 2 is the most likely under the current building code. There is some discussion about making some changes at the state building code. And so we proposed some ratios in the code that could, in limited scenarios, allow 3 or 4 units through an internal conversion, but far and away the most likely outcome is 2. So that as a background, and so with that, we really propose these options to mirror the ADU options. So first is the A, no parking. B is 1 space for any new units created. So just like the ADU.
Any new, or it says for the property?
That's why I just wanted to clarify. So under most scenarios, that would be just 1 space for the property because you'd only be adding 1 new unit. But, you know, if you had a very unusual internal conversion where you added 3 or 4 units, then it would be 1 for every new unit, not just 1, not capped at 1 for the property.
Okay.
And then the distinction with C, it would be, you know, again, to mirror the ADU options, it would be 1 space per unit for all of the units, so the existing and the proposed units that are created through internal conversion.
So going back to B again, I want to make sure I understand, require 1 space for the property as a whole, ADU included.
No, it would be to
Conversions.
require 1 space for every new unit added with the internal conversion.
B doesn't.
That,
B says.
That's why I'm confused.
Pete and I weren't able to exchange
able
notes
to
quite right, so that's why I wanted to clarify what B
Coordinate
is
on that.
intended to mean.
Sorry.
So what's the
Yeah,
difference
our-
between B
our-
and C then? If C is require 1 space per each unit,
For the-
what's the difference between that and B, requiring 1 space?
C
for the
ought to
property?
be what B says. It should
Sorry.
just be,
Oh.
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So if you had a 2-unit internal conversion, then B would require 1 space for every new unit because you've added 1 unit, and C would require 1 space for all units, meaning two parking spaces.
For all units, so if you had 4 units, it would only require 2.
No,
said
so under
before.
this, if you had 1 original house, right?
Yeah.
And you internally converted it to 4 units, then you've added 3 units. So under B, you'd be required to add 3 parking spaces, and under C, you'd be required to have 4, to cut 1 for every unit, existing and proposed.
Including
We had some conversation about a minimum, a maximum internal conversion. I wrote something down in my notes about that. I thought we had some, because I'm trying to get my head around that and then what we talked about before.
That sounds more like boarding rooms with 4 internal.
Yeah, and there's some ratios in the code. You have to, I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but I believe the primary limiting factor is you have to have 2,500 square feet of site area per unit proposed with an internal conversion. And so only a 10,000 square foot lot would qualify for 4 units. The majority of lots would only qualify for 2 or 3. And again, the state building code is very limiting in this regard, and so that's most likely to limit most internal conversions to 2 units.
So you said internal conversions, and you said 10,000 square foot lot, so that's not actually internal inside the house.
No, the 10,000 is the size of the property.
That's what I thought, but she said internal conversion, I thought, well, that to me would mean inside the house, converting it, not inside the property.
Internal conversion does mean inside the existing building footprint.
That's what I thought I heard.
She's saying that you can only do internal conversions on certain size lots. So if you're going to do more than 2 units in an internal conversion, you have to have a bigger lot.
Thank you, that's what I was trying to
But the
clarify.
internal conversion by definition means you're using the existing square footage of the house. And that's why the density increase is not as dramatic potentially, because the same footprint is serving the same number of people, whether they're related or not. So if I have my family in a single family house, I have a bunch of teenagers, I got the same number of cars as if I internally convert into an ADU in a house, it's the same square footage.
Okay.
So theoretically, it ought to be the same density. I mean, even though it's 2 units rather than 1, or 3, or 4.
Sounds
Yeah,
cool.
it's just adding some walls, same number of showers per day, more or less, depends how much your
We
teenagers
don't
shower.
have in our packet the dimensional standards that you just referenced.
Yes, we do.
It's in this packet?
It's in
Be
these
in
low densities.
1720-030.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, maybe we should just go there right at the moment.
The newest packet is page 196. What questions do you have regarding this code? We can answer them for you.
Oh, yep, there it is. See,
See?
ratio of 1 dwelling for every 2,500 square feet of site area, up to a maximum of 4.
So they do tie the number of sites.
Do you have your packet with you?
I'll take your
So you
word
have
for
this
it.
all memorized. I'm glad somebody does.
I've read it enough, it's getting close. Well, and again, I'd just go back to D, 1 for every 2 units, rounded up.
Is there so 1720-030, and in looking at what's being proposed, is there a little caveat that says also see section blah, 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 section 1720-030, where it's got that in there? Is there a reference back, so if somebody's reading this and they don't know to go to 1720-30?
Which section are you talking about originally?
She's in parking and then in
Well, in parking and in the definition of, a duplex or an internal conversion, is there, since, hang on, just trying to go back and forth.
We, in 1752, where the parking standards are, internal conversion.
Not in the parking,
the definition of
in the
that.
definitions. So in your definition, and you talk about internal conversion, is there a reference back to 1720-030?
No, we don't add references to the applicable chapters in our definitions.
So that might be a good thing, because, most people are not going to look everywhere.
I would expect them to look under internal conversion before I'd expect them to look under definition. though.
Yeah.
And one other thing, as far as the discussions for internal conversions at the PAT, and I know Elizabeth has already said this before, was the concern about making it fit the neighborhood character and the desire to move away from creating essentially a parking lot on properties. And then associated with that too is retaining landscaping in front of properties and not paving a bunch of it. And we know paving also triggers a lot of stormwater improvements and things like that as well. So it starts to look very different.
Well,
So
again,
that
that's
was
why I think,
just
one-
reflecting the discussion.
That's a good point.
that's why I think though, the 1 for 2 thing is valid, because most 10,000 square foot lots, if they're gonna do a 4, have a driveway towards at least a 2-car garage. That's 2 parking spots just in the driveway. So, you know, they meet that just by the footprint of the building as it exists. I don't know a lot of 10,000 square foot lots where there isn't already off-street parking. I can't think of any off the top of my head from driving around the city, but I don't drive everywhere, so.
Just a question.
For the most part, there is,
I like the analogy, you're looking at 2 parking spots in front of the garage.
Yeah, the driveway area.
But you're not, are you counting any parking spots as being within the garage?
No,
Is that what a garage is for?
Well, but that's the.
I've never
that's
been
the-
able to park in my 3-car garage.
Yeah,
That's the owner's choice, you know,
Yeah.
if they need, if parking spots are critical to them, they say, well,
Get
let's
there.
clean out the garage and free up the space inside. So it is an available parking spot, it's just who chooses to use it.
yeah, it's just been my very limited experience that one of the best places for people to expand living is
True,
is
yeah,
converting a
yeah.
garage.
But,
So having a driveway in front of their house still keeps those parking spots in existence
right,
and doesn't somehow enable them to obliterate
But if
that as
it-
part
if
of their
it's a-
conversions.
2-car garage and they convert one, then you still have 3 parking spots
And they meet
for
the
that
minimum.
site.
Yeah, they meet the minimum.
Sounds like you guys are kind of narrowing down. Do you want to, are you ready for a poll or would you like more discussion?
Well, the only thing
I'm ready.
I just would, like I said, add a D, which is 1 for 2, round it up.
So I can go along with that too.
Yeah, noted.
What would that look like?
All right, you guys just want to go down the line?
Okay,
So what
so
are we
So
going to
you're
add a
saying-
D?
Or
adding D,
That require one space,
Per 2 units,
units.
rounded up.
okay.
1 parking space
Mhm.
per 2.
Yep. So if they have a 3, they gotta have 2. If they have a 1, well, they're not converting, so it's irrelevant.
option A. Option B, which is 1 space for each new unit.
I'm going to go with B.
Option C, 1 space per unit.
I think that
Option,
defeats the purpose.
option D. Okay.
I'm switching to D, I've decided. I can see that. This isn't going to work, nobody's going to go for B.
it looks like
But
we
it's our
have
decision. That's-
3 A's, 1 D,
Yeah.
1 C.
I want one change of vote to D.
I
D.
didn't vote for
D.
C.
So it's still 3 A's?
She didn't vote for
We
C.
have 3 A's and 3 D's.
That's what I thought we had.
Yeah, that's what I got.
So, okay.
It
Where's
sends,
Bob?
it
What do you
sends
want?
information to the next group or whoever looks
Yeah.
at it that we're kind of undecided on that one.
Okay, yeah.
But it's what we,
Okay, next.
So just let me go back and clarify something. So what we're primarily going over right now is the stuff that pertains to equitable housing.
Yes.
Okay, because one of the things that I have been having a difficult time with is as I read through this, and since we're still in work session, it would have been really great to separate out what is housekeeping and what is equitable housing and us, because I think we can dispense with the housekeeping stuff. It's the equitable housing stuff that we still have discussion about, and we could have dispensed with that pretty
Yeah.
easily.
Yeah.
There's a few things in here that are not equitable housing.
Yeah, and I think we could
And
deal.
some of them sit in both houses.
I know, and some of them sit in both houses, so we'd have to
Yeah.
take those out, but I'm just trying to figure out
Mm-hmm.
economies of scale and expediency,
Yep.
because there are things
appreciate
in
that.
one that are great that are not in the other.
So
You don't want to 300.
what we'd like to prepare for you at the next meeting is basically all of the decision points for all of the new items that have come up through the process and what the decisions have been to date, and not just responding to the planning commission, but also to the public comments that have been made
Right,
as well.
so it'll be
Yeah.
separated out by those two categories.
I think
Except-
they're hard to tease apart, to be
They're
honest.
very hard to tease apart, but as some of the things are clearly equitable housing.
Yeah, and I think they should be
Yeah.
put over in column B, and the other stuff is in column A.
just to clarify, we are not teasing them out because a lot of them are related. I think the deeper you dive into these, the more you'll see that equitable housing relates to multifamily, which relates to all the commercial stuff, and the same with all the same land division processes. So
I just think
it's all
by
very
dumping it all together,
subjective
it
to
got,
tease them out.
for the ease of staff, I understand why you did that. For the ease of the public, I don't understand why you did that.
Do you mind if we keep going with these housing options?
Can I interject something really quick?
Please.
I stood outside the last time we had a meeting and listened to a couple ladies, and I agree with them. They looked at these packets and they said that they could look at them online. The public is saying there's so much for them to even read, to understand. That's why they say that a lot of them don't come here, because they don't even know what to ask. There's so much in there, and we want public input, but they don't even know where to begin. And I think Damon heard him, they said, we can't print out these kind of packets. And we try to go through all that to find things that impact us, because they got postcards or whatever. They said, we're totally lost. It's like the seven of you sit up there and you just tell us what you're gonna decide, and we don't even know where to put the input. That's the kind of input we're getting from the public.
Yeah, we've done a lot of opportunities for public participation.
I know you
get
have.
reading the code is
It still doesn't.
But that's what they
clunky
still
and
think, because
complex.
it's just so overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming for us, let alone for the
Well, I
general
mean, just for
public.
you guys too, to reflect back on how we've got here to, there's, in the packet was included the stuff from the open houses as well as the online surveys. I know we had over 300 in at least one of the 3 online surveys. And there's little PowerPoints that get to the point of what we're trying to do online. So if you have any ideas for us to make
You know,
things easier, please let
I
us know.
don't, and I think Damon and I both said, well, there's postcards, there's all these workshops.
Did you see the video?
Which
Is there
video?
a video?
Yeah, we have a video that we did on
Because I've been
social
watching all
media and
these,
stuff
even though I missed
too.
some, I've been watching them all.
Yeah,
Laura, I don't-
mean, the thing is that if someone has comments, we'll love to
Just-
take them. They don't have to
they-
get
they-
into the
the-
nit and gritty of how it's
But that kind
written.
of hit us, saying, well, nobody up there listens to us anyway. You all have your decisions you've all kind of come to on this, and that for us to come to any of these work sessions or anything else, we don't know where to begin to ask, and it's so complicated. And I agree, it is complicated.
Well, I mean, if you guys had already had a decision, this would be like one meeting and stuff. I think you
Yeah,
guys are doing
Laura,
a
I
good
don't
job.
think Tom is taking any swipes at staff. I think
No,
that-
not at
I
all.
think that the city has done
Yes, I agree.
what they can do.
It's the public
What I
view.
hear Tom saying is that aside from the last time we updated the comprehensive plan, this is probably one of the most complicated things that we have done. And you are not going to get the run-of-the-mill average person in Oregon City to come in off the street to say, hey, you know, what's going on with this? I mean, they'll all be jumping up and down about it after things start happening. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I have spent years thinking about citizen involvement, being on committees, understanding what it is. And I understand what he is saying. When people have come up to me to ask me, they say, well, we understand you're having some really major code changes. And I have to be honest with them. They ask me, well, do you understand it? And I go, no.
Yeah.
I don't totally understand it. And if I don't totally understand it, guess what the regular average Oregon City person is doing? They are just saying, I don't want to deal with it. I'm throwing up my hands, you know, let the chips fall where they except these 2 people that talked to me today, but they knew enough to go, you know, what's going on. And I said, I can't summarize it for you in 5 minutes here, Fred Myers. And it's really complicated. And I've been taking this binder with me everywhere I go. So when I have 10, 15 minutes, I sit down and I try to read some of this just to get through it. And people are looking at me, what are you reading there? What, you know, you've got the Bible? I said, well, pretty close. Pretty close. It's pretty close to the Bible.
It's the neighborhood Bible.
The neighborhood Bible. So again, it is not for lack of trying.
Right.
You know, unless somebody's ox is being gored, they're not going to show up here. You know, as you know from your experience working as staff, they're not going to be here. You know, if I suddenly went to all my neighbors and said, guess what, they're going to build a 15-story townhouse next door, they would all be here in a hot second.
Yeah.
There's more here that have implications down the road than they do today, as my esteemed colleague to my far right has stated. We don't know, they don't know, and so right now it's out of sight, out of mind. They're not going to worry about it. And as much as I've said to anybody that's asked me, I said, you really should come if you're concerned about this, this, or this, or you have ideas about this, this, or this, please come. Do you see them here? No, because
I think there's gonna be a bunch at 7, based on what I
not,
see
not a
in the
big,
neighborhood.
not a big
Dayton's
priority.
actually put it out there on Chit Chat, which was canceled by Chit Chat because they didn't want any
Well, I
politics.
know, but
So we
still,
put it on our
I wish
site.
there was some way we could
But-
say, this really affects everybody, you really should come, maybe we should start paying everybody $10 to show up or
But
something.
I think
Raffle.
Raffle, there you go, raffle, car wash, but anyway,
I
so,
thank Denise for putting it into words because that's exactly, it wasn't anything about you. I know you've done everything you can do.
They've done
It's
it.
just people feel overwhelmed.
it is
And
overwhelming.
you've done a lot more than happened 10 years ago.
Exactly.
You're getting
So
more.
kudos on
Right
that,
here, just-
kudos on that.
God, I couldn't believe these people being so
Thank you guys for
So,
sticking through it
we're,
too.
we're doing the best we
I
can.
am
You guys have
happy
been
to talk
living,
to
breathing, and
anybody.
eating this, and you have starting to hate this.
Anybody in the public can call, and I'd be happy to walk them through either the code or the matrix that we
We
prepared to
understand,
try.
we put it out there.
Yeah.
Yes.
All of us have put it out there to people.
So to move this along.
So let's move on to the next
I
thing.
have option C, which is 1 for 2.
Are we talking about 3 to 4 plexes here?
That's what you got up there.
Yep.
Are you adding
okay.
another one now again?
Well, option C,
So option-
1 for 2.
So where are we on this 3 to 4 plex? Because I'm still very uncomfortable with this. I am super uncomfortable with this. I don't think of 4 units is single family. It's not.
Yeah, so the idea behind the 3 to 4 plex is that it adds a little bit more flexibility in the single-family zones. And we expect that the majority of these, apologize, we don't have a lot of images tonight to help break this up, but that most of these we're gonna see developed as essentially townhouse-like products. The only difference is that they would be on a single lot rather than individual lots for fee simple ownership of the units. And so, as we have seen in townhouse development in Oregon City to date, the majority of units have been built. The developers have elected to provide parking either in the driveway and or in the garage. So we would expect some flexibility in how these develop out. And so the question is just in terms of the parking minimums, both for parity with the existing regulations that we have for townhouses and to further the equitable housing goals, what the, ideal parking, let's not say ideal, what the parking recommendation is from this group moving forward to support the 3 to 4 plex development. And so option A is to have a no parking requirement similar to the townhouse requirement that already exists. That was the staff and PAT recommendation. Alternative B here is to require 1 space per unit. That would apply to all units, so 3 for a 3-plex, 4 for a 4-plex. And then option C, from Commissioner Maybe would be to require 1 space for every 2 units.
Just to clarify on B, below the asterisk, it says parking space may be off-street or on-street. So that doesn't necessarily say for a 3 or 4-plex, 3 garages or 3 driveways. It could be
Correct.
off-street.
We modeled
on-street.
I provided some sort of draft conceptual code in your memo on this issue, and the idea was to take the same approach to on-street and off-street parking as is currently used for ADUs, and also the on-street parking credit that already exists in the code for commercial development, and modeled it similarly, so that if you have a 22-foot long stretch of uninterrupted curb in front of your lot, that could count as one of your required parking spaces. So that would be the on-street option, and if that's not sufficient, then it would have to be provided off-street, or if the developer simply elects that they'd rather have off-street.
Most of the townhouses I've seen, they actually have a driveway underneath and a garage underneath. But I don't like
Right.
the idea of it can be on-street or on-street. That just, to me, doesn't guarantee that there's going to be any garages or driveways. But so I don't like A or B or C.
That's fine.
Does somebody have, what's the volume of 3 and 4 plexes today? Or experience, history?
Traffic volume or?
No, how many do we
No, just
have?
for
Units?
units, number of 3 or 4 plex units that we have, and do
A
we
handful.
anticipate
Oh,
a significant increase?
Harris Lane has duplexes.
So,
It's the only one I know about.
Probably.
can I back up for just a minute?
Yeah.
I've been
It'll take me a minute,
asking
but
for
I
a couple of
can
them.
see what I have.
Has the commission decided that 3 and 4 plexes are good in single-family neighborhoods?
Well, that's what I just brought up earlier.
Have they come upon that decision?
Nope.
They're proposed in our medium-density residential, not in the low-density
Not low
residential.
density, so the
See, I
R5 and the
think anything
R35.
4 and over is multiple family to me, and I don't see these in single family neighborhoods.
we liken it to townhomes, which are already a permitted use in the R3, 5, and R5 zones.
Yeah, well, McLaughlin doesn't have a
Or-
tradition of having any 3 or 4 plexes or townhouses. That's not traditional in the conservation district.
In the conservation district, but there is a fourplex 2 blocks from me.
Yeah, but that's not in the conservation district.
I know, that's what I said. Not in
Carrie,
the
can you
conservation
talk
district.
about how these relate to historic districts?
My understanding is that duplex or a 3 or 4plex, if it were otherwise allowed in the underlying zoning, would be subject to design review
Right.
anyway. And so that question about whether or not that design of that duplex or 4plex was compatible and otherwise compromised the character of the district would be germane to that and could be denied on that basis. So
Somebody's proposed
they
one
may
over
not be
on
appropriate, I mean,
a townhouse development over on Madison.
it would take some special design to make a 3 or 4plex appropriate in a historic district, and that's what the design overlay is, historic district overlay is for.
Right, to impose those additional requirements, yeah.
Yeah. And if
So-
I,
So no, we hadn't totally decided. We've been talking about it. We talked about it a lot once when Zach wasn't here. We talked about it some more when Bob wasn't here, then Bob was here.
I mean,
So is this decision the cart before the horse?
I know that this is a little bit off topic, and maybe we didn't even talk about this either, but if we're gonna plop these in our neighborhoods, first of all, what's to see, I mean, how do we know that someone isn't just gonna come in and just spec it out and buy it at the highest market, or sell it at the highest market value? There isn't any safeguards that keep anything like that from happening, right? So, I mean, I guess if I was going to have a 3 or 4 unit product in my neighborhood, I would probably want to have some kind of waiver of system development charges for accessory dwelling units or triplexes, or property tax exemptions, those kinds of things, so that these can actually be affordable units. So there can be something that runs with the property that distinguishes all of these units that are getting special consideration for code reductions, that there should be some meaningful housing, affordable housing provisions to keep these as affordable housing. Otherwise, for me, I mean,
It doesn't make any
I don't
sense.
see this becoming affordable housing. I think this is just kind of this
Yep.
Window dressing.
Keynesian way of creating housing that is supposed to trickle down to the end user, and it never will.
I know.
I agree with
And I'm
you, Paul.
sorry,
totally
I don't
agree.
mean to,
I agree with you.
Plots, but,
It's very idealistic that this is going to
but
be
I think
affordable.
that there has to be some kind of, you know,
But Paul,
Economic incentives.
but Paul, all those
Whatever they are.
system development charges decrease, all that, whoever builds them, especially if it's somebody from out of state, they're still gonna go at the highest value they can get.
But-
So it seems to me we have to have control on
But that's-
what
it
they can
just
charge
makes,
for
it
it.
makes sense for us to follow suit with what's going on in Salem, you know, with HB 2377, to be able to do property tax exemptions for houses that meet certain rent targets and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I would feel a lot better about doing this stuff.
know,
if
I
we
would
had-
too.
If we had some
That's the
kind
only
of.
way I would go for that,
It's
is
the
to
cart
keep the
before the
value
horse.
low, so people can afford them.
So the scope of this project is to
Doesn't
look at
include
the
that.
supply side and look at our one tool in the toolbox among many tools, which is just the zoning code. We've sort of talked about this a couple of times before and suggested that if the planning commission wants to have some policy advice to the city commission about things like this, this is a really great time to do that and to submit some perhaps written letter or something that talks about the options that you believe the city commission should further consider.
But we don't have the option to not have the cart before the horse, which is what he's saying.
I know that
I mean,
this is probably not.
Discussing
I wish
parking.
that if I had my wish, I would put the kibosh on this whole thing until number one, we had an inventory, and number two, we had incentives in place so that when we implement this code, it will actually happen. Because I'm just not, it's very, what word did you use? It's very pie in the sky. I mean, I understand the goal, I understand
Yep.
that we have the grant, but that is what my level of frustration is the whole cart is before the horse here.
Yep.
And this is just not, I wish that it were not, but I can't make it go away. I can't make it not be this way.
along with
This is
that
where my
line of-
frustration is coming from with this whole thing, because I know what we need to do. Not that I know the answer, but I know what the right path, and we're over here when we should be over here. Let's just keep moving on. It's just,
Vern had-
it's, the
Vern had something.
frustration's just gonna keep getting.
My point on that is this 3-4-plex is kind of complex and it's kind of like a menu. We can put it on our menu, but if nobody comes forward to exercise it, it'll probably be off the menu in 6 months or 2 years, or we'll change it. But we're testing, will this help affordable housing? I don't know the answer to that.
Some developers are
Yeah.
gonna come along and take advantage of this.
But along Laura's suggestion, it may be one of those items that says, yeah, we won't kill it at the planning commission, but we might like to say, take a look at it and see if some of those longer term incentives, we can't recommend those incentives at the planning commission, I don't think.
Sure we
You
can.
can recommend them.
We can recommend them. We can't make them happen though.
Right, so avoid the whole conflict and put it on that list and say, take a look at it, but we're not real hot about the whole thing or
You mean leave it open for
excited
this,
about it.
you mean leave it open for the city commission to make their decision?
Well-
Good God, look what happened with lot averaging.
Well, the other thing too is that we'll be scheduling a work session with you to get prepped for, and any advice you want to provide to the city commission in advance of the budget. So we're now starting to think about the next biennium budget, which our budget ends next summer. And so there'll be more time for these larger policy advice as well.
If they,
But for 3 to 4 plexes, are you guys ready for a vote, or do you want to chat about that a little bit more?
No.
Just as far as parking is concerned?
Okay, so parking.
well, Denise, what we were saying, are you saying, like I had said, cart before the horse, is this too soon to look at parking when we haven't even determined 3 to 4 plexes?
Well, I think we ought to just cast that aside. Let's get through parking regardless
Okay.
of where that leads us and move on to the next thing.
Okay,
Otherwise, we're just not gonna,
Whatever.
things aren't gonna happen.
Well, so we have A, B, and
And you
C.
would propose C. I give a thumbs up for C.
Just to clarify,
C
C
again
is,
is,
C is 1 unit per 2, I mean, 1 slot for 2.
so require one
Per 2, rounded up.
space per 2 units?
Rounded up.
What do you mean when you say rounded up?
Well, if you have 3 units, you don't have 1.5 spaces.
You have to have 2.
Unless you have a
Okay,
little
all right,
mini,
that's what I thought you
original
meant.
Mini Cooper, that's a half a car.
Just wanted to clarify.
Where are we in the cycle of
Okay,
kind
so
of our direction?
we got
He said
A,
A,
Paul,
I'm sorry.
he said something.
C.
C?
Yeah, I went for C.
Oh, you're last. Tom?
Oh, I'd go for D, but there isn't a D, 1 for every unit, so I'll go with C.
A,
Right, and C?
We got a consistent line of voting going on
Nope.
here.
You're abstaining?
Nope,
You have a D?
this.
I'm
this
thinking.
won't go
Oh, okay.
nowhere. It's just
I
take,
know, because we made these 42 decisions.
I'm gonna go C, but I'm holding my nose.
42 decisions and the city commission still doesn't listen
Okay.
to us.
Parking doesn't necessarily mean-
No,
Right,
I know,
next.
I know.
And
Oh, if you're interested, I was able to find that data we have on existing 3 to 4 plexes in the city. So as of the 2010 census, which is already getting dated, there
Yes.
are 359 total units in 3 to 4 plexes, and that's the units, not the projects. So if you divide it by 3.5 on average, we're looking at 100 projects with 3 to 4 units each that are in the city existing
lot
right
Is
now.
more.
that, Pete, is that the stuff that Handress built over on South End? Is that
I
considered 3
think
to 4
that's
plexes?
everything that comes under the census, unit type.
Well, I mean,
so-
where are they?
that's multifamily.
I don't have that up.
Or the stuff that is built on, near the gas station
Yeah, on
is,
South End.
Does it include that? Yeah.
it's single-family attached, right?
Do you
That's not a
track
3-4-plex.
how
I
many
didn't know if those are
parking
individual
spots
lots
those have
or
at all? Do you
there's
track?
No,
certain number of
census,
units
the
on a
data
lot.
just has an inventory of
Individual lots.
how
Each
many
one of those units is an
units
individual
per,
lot.
Yep.
by building
Is
size.
that on the regular census when we tell how many people live in a house?
So where
They
are these
actually
3 to
track?
4 plexes that we have in Oregon City?
Sorry.
I don't know where they are.
Yeah,
We
we'll
can look into that some
we'll
more,
look
but
into that.
I just,
I mean,
for
it's not
purposes of
broken out
discussion,
geographically.
the census data, I happen to have the census data available, so.
Let me add,
You did such a good job on that.
Yeah.
What else do you want to know?
Is there any incentive or rebate from the tax point of view to keep them somewhat affordable housing?
not yet,
Not
there's
this point.
nothing in
You
Oregon.
may-
I don't believe so.
No, that's what Denise was
That,
saying is
that
there's.
was,
Just similarly, there's no similar, as I understand it, I don't believe there are any incentives such as that for any type of housing right
That's
now.
why nobody can afford it, there's no incentive. My question was that census, is that part of the national census on how many
Yes,
people live? I
yes.
didn't see anything about the kind of housing and.
Yeah,
floor prices.
they asked you in the census
It's been a
what
long
type of
time, I
house do
guess.
you live
Yeah.
in, or what type of
You'll have
house
another
you
chance
have.
soon. I get excited when
remember
my
that.
census form.
2 more years, if I live it, I can.
Are you guys ready for the next
Yes,
topic?
please.
No, we need to take a 2-minute break,
Okay,
because I'm not missing anything, and I need to go to the
Okay, the
necessary.
pizza, the pizza room.
Yeah, I need to go to the pizza room, thank you.
Can you pause it, Pete? And then
Just pause it. Get up, stretch your legs, because, you know, we got a long haul here. Also, please be thinking about when you'd like
Proceed.
Okay.
Paul, do you want a piece of pizza?
There's a lot left
Here,
over.
Paul.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've had my fill of pizza.
So the next item was lot size reduction and averaging. So I've included all of the code that is in the packet with respect to lot size averaging. And this states that a subdivision in the R10, R8, R6, R5, and R35 dwelling districts, so low and medium density, may include lots for single-family detached residential use, including any proposal with accessory dwelling units that are up to 20% less than the required minimum lot area of the applicable zoning, provided that the average lot size of all proposed lots, single-family detached residential lots, meets the minimum site area requirements of the zone.
Hey, let's stop. Now, Tom's gonna say, what's the English translation of that, right, Tom?
I'm writing
So
it down
that
myself,
means-
right, how I interpret it.
Any
He spoke Latin.
So 20% of the lots in a subdivision can be smaller than the minimum lot size.
Okay,
So, sorry.
Strike that, reverse it.
Start there, reverse it. A subdivision may include lots that are 20% smaller than the minimum lot size, as long as the entire subdivision averages out to the minimum. So you can have some lots that are larger, and you can have some lots that are smaller, but it's got to average out to the minimum. You're not allowed to include land underneath the power line easement in that calculation. And it only applies to lots that are going to be for single-family detached use.
So duplexes and corner
Well,
duplexes.
wetlands are going to come out of your gross developable area in the
That's what I was
first
gonna say.
place. So once
Okay.
you've got land that's designated as net developable area, then you apply your minimum lot size and you determine how many lots you can ostensibly get out of a land division. And then do this lot averaging calculation after that. Go ahead.
You're correct, it won't apply to corner duplexes, internal conversions, et cetera.
Right.
so just ADUs.
No, ADUs won't
They don't
factor into.
They don't factor into.
Detached, single family.
So currently, with this, we could have a situation like we had last year with, out of 77 lots, we have 70 of them undersized and seven of them grossly oversized. And as long as it hits the average, then it's cool.
But it wouldn't include that. I don't know how
That's
cool it is,
right.
but it's legal.
It wouldn't
It
include the
wouldn't
power line.
include the power line either.
No,
So the
I'm just-
Yeah, he's
likelihood that
not
you have
mentioning
these
that.
huge properties is
Have power
lower
line
than you
easements.
would have in the situation from before.
Right, I'm just saying that assuming that we're talking about the total available land area, that imbalance still could occur of
Yes.
many little lots and a few big lots to counter the balance.
Less than what it was before. That was 20 before.
Can
Yeah,
just-
so when Pat reviewed this, they essentially made no changes except for that it can only count single-family
Right, they
detached.
took the.
So everything else is sort of the same.
Can you remind us of what we voted 4-2 of, and that the commission changed around after we voted on it 4-2? Can you remind us of, wasn't it 20% of the homes, properties, could be less than 20%? What was the?
I think it was
you remember?
25, it was limited the number of lots that could
Could be.
receive a reduction. I think it was at 25%. And I can't quite recall off the top of my head if it was a reduction of 10 or 20%.
It was a reduction of 10%,
10.
no more than 25% of the lots can be undersized. At least
So-
that's based on the February.
That's what we had decided and voted on, or is that what
That
the
is
commission
what, that
decided?
is what the planning commission moved forward to the city commission. So,
Then the planning commission reversed us.
No,
So,
it
yeah.
didn't.
Huh?
The
So you
city
didn't read-
commission,
Excuse me, which commission am I sitting on? No.
well, the planning commission also included the thing where it says that you can't include the
Power lines,
power
yeah.
line, so the city commission retained
But I
it.
think our decision went beyond just the power lines at the time.
Yeah.
And then they directed the, this advisory group as a part of this project to also take a look at it, which they did as well.
And they
After
came
our
back,
fact.
So yeah, they did two things. They made the change to not include power line easements, and then they said, let's take a deeper dive in this at the advisory group meeting. The advisory group
Okay, what
talked
gets
about it.
me and why I've been fighting it all this time or making something of conscience is the fact that we made a decision regarding that one back in the fall. Then the attorney overturned it saying we had erred. We didn't err, we made a decision based on what we knew. And then the next thing I know is the city commission decided to have a work session and discuss it. And then we voted on it as, they kicked it to us to make a decision. We made a decision, we gave it to the city commission, and they overturned what we did again. They changed a lot of what we had decided on as a planning commission.
I would
That's why
encourage you to stay focused on whatever this code is. I mean, they
that's
essentially
why I'm
give you
going on
another
this.
crack at it and.
I brought that up only because of the fact that I want to make sure that kind of what we decided back then is included with this. And I know I'm going back for history and I'm not trying to focus on that, but that's why I'm so conscientious on this right now, is
Well-
making sure. Go ahead.
and basically what the city commission did is they adopted the high line, the wires thing, and then they punted the other two
Yes.
things to the study. The-
Yeah.
And they didn't say no, they just said, we're not gonna make a decision on that, we're gonna see what comes out of the study. So now we've got what's come out of the study, and this is what's in front of us.
Correct.
And now we have to decide if that's good enough, or whether we want to send the same thing that we sent earlier up, adapt it to whatever the current changing standards are, or, what?
And that brings it back to today. Thank you.
So, and so this just has, the PAT didn't make any recommended changes then. They just said, yeah, the wires thing is a good thing to get rid of, and duplexes are gone.
Their change was essentially just to remove everything that's not single family.
So who was
Detached.
who was the second study group?
The PAT, the advisory team for equitable housing, remember it was a discussion item?
Yeah, I remember that, but you said that it was gonna be referred to a study group, so I just assumed it was some other
The
study
PAT's
group.
the study, sorry, I didn't
Oh,
clarify.
I see, okay. It wasn't some separate group.
No. It was just as a part of this project.
So that group's all about equitable housing, but not about the situation we faced last fall necessarily.
I mean, the planning commission is,
It'll go
can
away.
keep it, change it, it's all up to you.
Well, I
And I know
still,
this, sorry, the sixth bullet has to deal with alleys, and that section of code has been in the code for some time. It allows you to count the alley towards your lot size, even if it's in a tract or whether it's dedicated. It doesn't affect the minimum setbacks for the zone, so you still have to measure your setbacks from the lot line. Most of the time, alleys are dedicated to the public, and that's a 15-foot wide alley or 20-foot wide alley.
But in
Most-
standards have changed.
Most new
I have
housing
10
doesn't
foot.
have alleys, do they?
Yeah, it depends on, and Josh can talk about what Public Works prefers. But right now, an alley, if it's provided in a new subdivision, has to be 20 feet wide.
right, dedicated to the public.
And it doesn't have to be dedicated to the public, but it does have to have public easements for access and utilities, if there are public utilities in
Okay, well,
the.
why would we allow for an alley to be counted as part of the lot area of a parcel?
Part of the reason was alleys are required in the high and
Right.
medium and mixed-use zones. The discussion has been, should that be limited to the concept plan areas? Because that's where the larger parcels are, where you can actually make alleys work, because it's a.
I would, yeah,
And
I
you
think we
free
talked
up.
about that before, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because,
And then in those higher zones, there's less land
right,
for public. But you're gonna have a 54-foot right-of-way anyway. You're gonna have an alley in the back, so a lot of the land is eventually gonna be reserved for vehicle traffic and parking.
Has
and
there been
cars.
any new development with an alley? I can't imagine any new.
Yes.
It's good that you should ask
Okay.
that. We had one subdivision, Crabtree Terrace
Terrace.
2, back in 7 years ago. We applied for a variance from the planning commission from the alley requirement and was approved. Because it was a second phase of a subdivision that didn't have alleys and the requirement came in halfway through the process, so.
So alleys would have
But
been
there
in
are
different
some
properties and.
along Maple
Yeah,
Lane,
okay.
behind Maple Lane Road on the south side that have alleys that
Yeah.
hook up cul-de-sacs.
Right.
And they work really well because those houses don't have access onto Maple Lane Road.
Yeah, I was
That's
remembering
not a
that.
flag lot road, that's considered an alley?
It's an alley.
Those
I
ones-
just can't imagine any developer giving up any land for an alley.
The ones on South End
But they
too.
can't have access on Maple Lane. That's why it was done that way.
Isn't that where the alley becomes part of the lot size?
That's what he's
Yes.
saying here.
That's what I was asking, how does it become that
So
way?
the developer's not giving up anything. He's still got a lot size.
If you have an
that
easement,
includes
to me, it's the
half of
same
that
as
alley
having
road.
dedicated.
Charge even higher. Go ahead.
So juicy fun fact.
So,
It's equitable at some time.
Damon, in reading this, I'm trying to figure it out myself, compared to what we had decided, 25%, no more than 25% would be allowed. Do you think this meets this at all, or is this, am I missing something? It doesn't meet what we originally determined, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's missing both of those. The max number that can be adjusted and and then we had a 10% rather than a 20%.
Yeah.
Because our concern and our discussion was if you had an R10 with 20%, that becomes an R8. I mean, it's 8,000 square
Per
feet.
feet, exactly.
So that's a zone change. And, you know, staff's point is, you know, it's still the same zone, it's still low low density.
Density residential.
So we had 10%, because the other concern is that in R6s could become 4,800.
Yeah.
And that seems pretty small. So,
I'd split the difference and go with 15%. I think that 20% is still too much.
but 10 and 20 is so easy to do mathematically.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
And 10.
Not to mention that the minimum of 25% of them being able to be averaged, maximum.
Well, your example, we had, that you gave a little while ago was those lots, we had X many lots and all of them but 7 were
Yeah,
below.
and I kind of exaggerated, but
No,
it was
that's
still
pretty
pretty
close.
It
close.
was pretty close
yeah.
to what it was.
That's pretty close.
That's why that neighborhood around it was so upset, because only 7 homes were gonna meet the R8, the rest of them were gonna be R5s and 6s.
Well, close, but I mean, I think, you know, 2 things. One, the whole bit about counting public alleys. I mean, they don't count the street, why should they count the public alley?
Yeah.
But,
Well, he says, but not all of them are dedicated to the public.
I know, and
But they
then-
have easements in them.
Yeah.
They have an easement for access and maybe an easement for utilities. You can't build on it, but you can still
but
count it.
I've got an easement for utilities through my property, and people don't drive on it.
No, that's true.
My neighbors don't, you know, my neighbor can't drive through my property, so, well, he can if he wants to smash fences. But, so, you know, if they can't put a shed on it, they can't, you know, the only thing they can do potentially is park in it, which would block it.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
guess
you're
with
saying
20
then-
foot,
Then why would they be
They're
allowed
not
to count
for
it as part of the
parking,
lot?
yeah. They'll be
Yeah.
marked no parking.
yeah, so I mean, it's a street, and we don't count streets. So, you know, where I
Unless they're
would,
private.
yeah.
But the street gives you the value really in maintaining the front of the units. Don't have driveways and garages and all the curb cuts
Although
and
some
all
alleys
that.
can have garages
So
to 'em.
you improve the frontage of your housing, looks of it.
But yeah, you
At the
can't park back
expense.
there necessarily if it's narrow.
Yeah, it
You
does
can't
create
park
more
behind your
space
house.
for
You
on-street
can
parking and
park in
street
front of your
trees, because you
If
don't have
there's
all those
any
driveway
parking
cuts.
But you don't
So,
have curb.
in one sense, allowing the credit for the alley is incentivizing the alley. But
Well,
If you want to make a change, make a suggestion for
Yeah.
a change.
Well, my suggestion is that we could, now that the study is done, we send up our previous recommendation, which is 10% reduction and 25% maximum on the smaller lots. If Denise proposed 15, but, you know,
I know you like lace round numbers.
yeah, that's just,
Is that,
and I know, I'm not sure that public alleys should be counted in the lots, but I'm prepared to give that up if it means these other two things go forward.
is that in addition to how this code language is written, which restricts it just to single-family detached and it limits all the other
Yes.
Yeah,
stuff?
but I mean, the others are very logical. I mean, the power lines and the duplex, that's all logical. So it's just, you know,
You know the city commission's gonna change it
I
back to.
don't know that.
We don't know
But my
that.
conscience tells me I have to follow what I said before, and if this is the only stickler in this whole work, after all the work that our department's done, I'm still gonna be a stickler on exactly the way you just put it.
Okay, well, let's
Do
do
you,
that.
do you have any options proposed like we did on the earlier ones tonight?
No, I didn't,
Okay.
so this would be the only option,
He's making another option.
added option.
Okay. Well, I guess just as a quick consensus, is everybody okay with the public alleys thing?
I'm not, I don't think it should be counted as part of the lot.
Neither do
You
I.
can't, you can't do anything with it.
I like it, I like
The
it.
alleys can be counted.
Incentivizing it.
Yeah, it's been that way
I'm
for
not
I don't know
understanding how
long.
it incentivized them to do something. I know what he just said, but I still don't understand
Here's
how
Bob,
that
Bob will make the decision.
incentivizes it.
Yep. Thumbs up or thumbs down, Bob?
Which finger do you want?
We've already had that
I said
discussion.
thumb. I very clearly said thumb.
Well, you know, in the original plat, the 1844 plat, almost 175 years old, by the way, next year, the alleys are only 10 feet
10
wide.
feet,
And they are dedicated to, all of them are dedicated to the public.
yeah. And they have in varying
In
conditions
the
today.
1844 plat of Oregon City.
Or of Kenema.
Not, Kenema wasn't part of the
I
1844
know, but
plat.
you said in Kenema, they're 12.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob,
so-
we're discussing, Bob, the alleyways, should they be considered a part of your property, or are they a public right of way?
They're a public right of way.
So should they count the square footage of the alley towards the average size of the lot?
No, they belong to the public.
Okay?
I mean, what's the deal? What's the big mystery?
Well, that's what we're having a discussion about, so,
James, Christmas.
okay, well, I
Thank God
guess,
Bob showed up.
okay, it looks like we don't want it to be counted as part of the alley, a part of the lot.
Okay. And then the other thing too, Bob, is we were talking about lot area is when we sent our recommendation up to the city commission before, it was no high power lines, no, 10% instead of 20% reduction in lot size, and maximum of 25% of the lots could be smaller than normal, or smaller than the R. Then the city accepted the power line thing and punted the two restrictions to the PAT, the equitable housing question. They said they did not accept those two restrictions, but they did take, they did say that lot averaging only applies to single family. So basically duplexes, corner duplexes are out of the equation. The whole lot would be out of it. So where we're at is, do we want to send our earlier recommendation up again? Because they deferred that to the PAT. So the PAT said, no restrictions, it's fine. But they took some of the lots out. So that's where we're at. Do we want to send up 10% and 25%? Or do we want to send up the recommendation as it came from the PAT?
And I'm saying, let's go along with what our commission decided the last time, the 10 and the 25. 10% reduction, no more than that, because what we heard from that one neighborhood, as you remember, was that they are all complaining around there that only a few of the lots were gonna be big, the rest of them, they were asking for R8s, and they were coming in with R6s and R5s.
Well-
And at that time, and then it all got reversed, and we got into all these disagreements about it, so we're back to it again. Do we wanna limit it to 10% a reduction of the lot sizes? And only 25% of the lots of a major development get to be lot
Undersized.
averaged.
Oh, undersized.
So the
Undersized.
commission did something against our recommendation.
Yeah, they disagreed with us.
Well,
Where's the recall petition?
no, they,
That's been months.
they didn't do anything against it. They
It just-
adopted one thing and
that was all.
punted the other two.
things. Yeah, so I mean,
And so now the ball's been run back to the starting line, and do we want to
send up our original
send up the original
recommendation.
recommendation, or do we want to?
It's a matter of integrity.
Well, I think part of it has to do with the fact that, I mean, what the neighbors were concerned about primarily, as you recall, was that they wanted to see adjacent to their development lots of the same size.
Yeah.
And we were willing to compromise with the developer to say, look, could you change these 4 lots into 3 lots so there'll be a budding R10 to R10?
Or
And-
but
Yeah, R10 to R10, and then the rest of it, you can lot average or whatever you need to do. And part of the issue is that the reply we received is that they don't have to and they didn't want to. But barring that, so let's just go quickly down the line of what we want to do. So we know where you are, you want to make the change like we had originally,
Original, what
10,
we voted on.
10,
10 to
25,
25.
and no alleys.
and no alleys.
Okay.
So 10, 25, and no alleys,
That's a no.
okay?
Okay.
10, 25, and no alleys.
Yes.
10, 25, and no alleys.
Yes.
10, 25, and no alleys.
Sure.
10, 25, and no alleys. Okay, so it's, everybody yes, 1 no.
Yep. So that isn't everybody, yes.
Not everybody.
Well, everybody but my esteemed colleague to my further right.
This
Not the
pretty much
furthest
has-
right.
This pretty much has at its core,
Thank
a
you.
lot averaging.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's what
We
we've got
gotta
on.
remember what the intent of lot averaging is.
Well, the intent of what staff had meant for it to be didn't turn out to be that.
So
Intent in action. Okay.
Yes.
we're
Go ahead.
going into public hearing at 7.
Great. You got a couple more things real quick?
Well, we can continue on from here in the public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I clarify real quick, Bob, and for everybody? We've just voted.
You're clarifying, Bob?
6-1. No, we just voted 6-1 on this. And that was gonna be a stickler for me for voting for this entire package. However, I feel even if I vote for this package, the city commission is gonna change it
That's-
again.
Okay,
is
that's,
what it is.
that's irrelevant.
that's my problem.
That's irrelevant.
But we have to do our job.
Yes.
Argue about this.
Denise is right. I mean, what the commission does, that's their business. We're not trying to.
But they reverse us a lot.
Let's do
Well,
our.
we're gonna go and we're gonna give our case. The staff is gonna give our case and we're gonna be there to back the staff up on why we spent thousands of dollars and hours looking at all this, because we wanted to be absolutely
I didn't
sure
spend any money.
about what we were,
You spent hours.
hours. Your time is worth, your time is worth $26 and some cents according to the IRS and volunteer time.
Oh, geez, it's up to that now?
Yes.
God, I'm gonna volunteer. I can make more money than we're.
All right, are we ready to adjourn?
Yes.
Is that taxable?
Might be. I say consult your tax consultant, okay? We're adjourning the work session.
All right, you guys are only down to 3 more issues.
Okay, so just talk about.